Okay, so I want to begin by welcoming everybody to this program tonight. Uh, I am Carl Dix. I'm going to be the moderator of this program. And the program tonight is going to be a conversation that I'm going to have, well, mainly actually Erin, Kelley, and Patsy Rembert are going to have a conversation, and I'll probably come in at some point here or there. I'll tell you more about the program in a minute. What we're going to be talking about is this book, Chasing Me to My Grave, an artist's memoir of the Jim Crow South. And this is a book, and this is an experience that you are going to be glad you got a taste of here tonight. As I said, I'm Carl Dix. I work with Revolution Books. I'm a longtime revolutionary, a follower of Bob Avakian, the architect of a new framework of human emancipation, and author of The New Communism. Our featured guests tonight are going to be Patsy Rembert. She is the widow of Winfred Rembert, who is the artist whose memoir we're going to be talking about tonight, and Erin Kelley, who's the co-author of Chasing Me to My Grave, and also the author of an earlier book, The Limits of Blame, Rethinking Punishment and Responsibility, and it's a critical assessment of the criminal injustice system in this country. And the injustice part, that's me commenting on that. And look, we wanted to have a discussion about this book. The subtitle of it basically gets you to why we want to talk about it. An artist's memoir of the Jim Crow South. And both parts of that, the fact that it is the Jim Crow South and the actual experience and the very real horrors that were enforced on Black people in that period, and that this is an artist's memoir, someone who developed the skill to take some of that experience and both its horrific side, but also the joy that Black people were able to carve out of that existence and display that in a way that it reached out to people and that it told a story that people need to hear, in spite of what one section of the ruling class is telling us right now about don't teach people that history. That may come up in our discussion tonight or not. But that's why we wanted to do it. And look, Revolution Books is the place for a discussion like this. It's a bookstore that has books about the world and books for a new world. We not only have a lot of books, but we have discussions about some of the books there, like the one we're going to have tonight. But we also have poetry readings. We have concerts. We have authors, activists, revolutionaries getting together to talk about what's going on in the world and what to do about it. I'm going to have more to say about Revolution Books in a little bit. The last thing I'll say right now is that at the heart of Revolution Books and its work is the work of Bob Avakian, the longtime revolutionary leader from out of the 1960s. And like I said, the architect of a new framework for human emancipation. And I'll speak more to that in a little bit. What we're going to do here tonight is I have introduced the program, I've welcomed you to it, and then I'm going to turn it over to Patsy and to Erin, and they are going to talk about the book. Erin is going to show some slides from it. There will be some segments read from it, and you'll hear about Winfred Rembert's life, the experience that he went through, and how he only barely survived to go on to become the artist that he became. You'll also hear about a very touching love story. I'm sure that will make it into what we talk about tonight. After they do their presentations, I will have a question or two that I will raise in relation to them. Then I'll have a little bit more to say about Revolution Books, and then we'll open it up to the audience. We'll take your questions and comments, feed them to our guests, and they will respond to them. And that's how the program's going to go tonight. And let me introduce our speakers. First, I want to introduce Patsy Rembert. Patsy and Winfred had a decades-long love story that began in Southwest Georgia, moved to the Northeast in Connecticut, and they were like soulmates for decades, and that will come out. We also have Erin Kelley. Erin is a professor of philosophy at Tufts University. As I said, she's also the author of the book, The Limits of Blame, and she's the co-author of Chasing Me to My Grave. So with that, I want to just give it to our guests and let them lay it out for you, bring out the book. They'll include some slides from the book. I understand some of our audience will be getting this program on the radio, so y'all won't be able to see the book. That's too bad, because part of what makes this book striking is that a lot of Winfred's art is contained within the book. Maybe we'll try to describe some of it for you. But what you really got to do is you got to get this book. You can get it at Revolution Books, because any description that we give you won't match up to the actual visual impact of the art that this brother did. So you got to get the book. And as I understand it, Revolution Books, you can get it at the bookstore physically up in Harlem at Malcolm X Boulevard and 132nd Street. You can go online and shop online. And through January 31st, there's a 10% discount. So not only do you got to get the book, you got to get it quick to get that discount. With that, I want to turn it over to Patsy and Erin and let them take us into the life of Winfred Rembert.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, very good. Patsy and I have prepared some slides. I'm going to start by sharing my screen and getting us started, and then she's going to join me to talk about Winfred's story and her relationship with him and her own experience in Georgia. So this is a picture of Winfred Rembert. He was born in 1945, and he died, unfortunately, last year in March 2021. It's very sad that he's not here to talk about the book. I'm sure he would love to be here with you tonight, telling you about the book himself. But we're very fortunate to have completed the book before he died, so that his story will live on. And we are commemorating his legacy by talking about his story tonight. You might get the impression from this photograph of Winfred that he's a person with life experience and a story to tell, and you would be correct. Winfred was a very charismatic person. He had a great sense of humor, and he loved people. This is one of my favorite photos of him, and I think Patsy loves this photo too. Am I right, Patsy?
Yes, I do.
So I want to start us off by talking about Winfred's artwork and telling his story through the pieces of art that he did, which represents the book, because the book really weaves together Winfred's story as told in the artwork that he did, together with his with the written word, with his narration of his story. You should know that Winfred worked on leather. This is an example of one of his paintings on tooled leather, carved and tooled leather, which he then dyed. And all of the works that you'll see tonight that I'm going to be showing you in the slideshow are works on leather. And they have a real sculptural quality. They're very textural, which you get some sense of seeing them on a slide, but of course, much more so in person. And I'll just mention there's an exhibition of his work going on in New York City right now at Fort Gansevoort for a couple of more weeks. So those of you in New York, if you're interested in seeing some of his work in person, there's a wonderful, wonderful show at Fort Gansevoort down in the meatpacking district. So this is a painting called The Beginning. It depicts Winfred as a baby being given by his birth mother to his great aunt, Lillian Rembert, who's the woman who raised him. This was a very painful event for Winfred as he was growing up to reckon with. And he struggled throughout his life with the pain of his mother having relinquished him, and was a theme of the book that opens the book and closes the book, as told through Winfred's struggle to produce this painting, which is a painting of him on a journey to visit his mother, who lived in a different town. It was a painting he wanted to do for a long time, and he was finally, at the end of his life, able to produce the painting, and he talks about it in the book and in the closing of the book, which in ways that I find very moving. Patsy, do you want to comment at all on this painting or Winfred's journey seeking his mother's love?
Well, Winfred always had wanted to understand, or was trying to understand why she gave him away. He didn't understand at the time, and it still took him as a grown man to come to terms with her giving him away. And I think the reason that he felt abandoned don't mean that he was abandoned. He didn't understand that she was doing the very best that she could in the situation that she had got caught in. So he had some healing to do about it. And going down that railroad, he told me the only thing he could think about was he felt like he'd be safe when he got to his mom. That was one of the things that he was hoping, and that she would show him the kind of love that he was seeking. And he didn't really receive it in the way that he expected, that and hoped that he would get it. But I think she loved him, and in my heart, I know she did. But he just couldn't see it at the time.
I think one of the achievements of the book is that Winfred came to a sense of peace and understanding and some compassion for his mother. And he talks about that process in the book, throughout the book, at different moments.
Yeah. Forgiveness.
Yes, yes. So Winfred and his great aunt, Lillian, who he called Mama, lived in a tenant farmer's house on the edge of a cotton field outside of Cuthbert, Georgia, where she worked in the field. And this is a picture of Winfred on the step of their house being held by his sister, Lorraine, while his mother worked in the field, and his mama. And Lillian Rembert, Mama, told Lorraine, her daughter, that if anything happened to the baby, if he was fussing, if Lorraine needed Mama's help, that Lorraine should hang a white sheet next to the house, and Lillian Rembert would see that from the field and come back to take care of the baby. So this is a painting entitled, "What's Wrong with Little Winfred?" When Winfred got a little bit older, although still as a small child, he worked together with Mama in the fields picking cotton. This is a painting of people who worked in the fields, perhaps families that Winfred and Lillian worked together with. It's called Dinner Time in the Cotton Field. And I was hoping Patsy would talk a little bit about this painting and about the cotton fields, work in the cotton fields at that time. So many people worked in the cotton fields, and I'd like to hear what she has to say about it. I also happen to know that this is her favorite painting of Winfred's.
It really is. It's one of my favorite pictures that he done, because it's so lifelike. When I'm looking at this cotton field, it's a scene right out of my life. I just was not a good cotton picker, but it was some people that could pick 200 pounds of cotton a day and more. And they sit around on the sheets or baskets with the cotton in them. And those buckets and things you see just got their lunch and their dinner in it. And those are some long rows though, long. And there's no trees, as Winfred said, there's no shade there. But people worked long hours. They would get there and start working and work all day picking cotton. And
There's another example of a scene
this
of
is
cotton.
another cotton field, but the best times in the cotton field is when the old people start singing. And they would sing songs that would motivate you to work harder, give you some kind of relief as you worked. Was the songs that was sung in the cotton field.
I think these paintings really have a musical quality. There's so much movement. Maybe because Winfred fills the whole canvas up, so there's no place for your eye to rest. Maybe just like there was no time for people working in the cotton fields to rest. It was a very long day of toiling and hard work. It's a big theme in his artwork. He created many different versions of the experience of picking cotton in the field and turned it into something beautiful. Although he said it didn't seem beautiful out there once you got out there picking. It was pretty miserable. Sunrise or sunset, we're not sure which one, but people were out there all day long. Here's a scene of them weighing the cotton and
Knockoff time.
Knockoff time.
Mm.
Weighing the cotton and paying people by the amount they picked, usually a very small amount of money.
For the most part, when you got paid off, you owed half of that back. Because you had a commissary that you could go and get your lunch from, if those who did do it. And you made $2, you probably owed half of them $2. It wasn't but 2 cents a pound. So $200, 200 pounds wouldn't give you but $4. And so you didn't have much. And they made sure you didn't have much, but you made them plenty.
Yeah, was the system designed to exploit people's labor to the max, leaving them in poverty and destitution. Here's a painting of a picture Winfred talked about of a woman who was pregnant while she was working in the field. He said that she gave birth to her baby while she was working in the field, and she went right back to work because she was afraid of what the white man would think of her if she stopped working.
I had a cousin that had a baby in the cotton field and went right back to work. It's hard to imagine that, but that was the type of life that we lived, and we lived through it, and we struggled, but we made it. We made it. They'd have the babies in the cotton field, and some lady that was a midwife or new midwife things would come over and assist her, and then in having the baby, and then they would put the baby on a blanket or a sheet or wrap up the baby in an apron or something, and the dog would babysit, make sure no snakes got to it. And that don't make sense to me now, but that's what they done. They would have a dog babysit, and she'd go back to work. You think about that.
Yeah. Think about that. Winfred didn't go to school much because he was taken out of school to work in the cotton fields. He went maybe 1 or 2 days a week, he told me. This is a picture he painted called The Wood Boy. The Wood Boy is Winfred. He was so lost, he couldn't follow the lessons. So his teacher gave him the task of stoking the wood stove to make him feel important in the classroom. And he was grateful to her for recognizing his dignity and for her compassion. So this is the Wood Boy. Winfred didn't learn to read and write until later in life. He actually learned in prison. He was taught by a fellow prisoner some years later. It was a really important development for him that he finally did learn to read and to write. I'd like to read just a few sentences that Winfred said about the joy of learning how to read. And then I'll ask Patsy to talk about some of his writing, in particular, some of the beautiful letters that he wrote to her from prison. So Winfred said this: I think your mind is just waiting to learn. Your mind wants you to pick up a book and read it. Once I learned how, I began to read all the time. There was nothing else to do, and I was happy to do it. I wanted to read more. I didn't have any idea it would be like that. I knew I wanted to learn, but I didn't know my mind would open up to wanting to read more and more. I think that's a beautiful statement.
Yes, he was he was a fantastic letter writer. Believe me, I would enjoy reading his letters when he'd write me. Once we started, and the letters that I got from him in the beginning was a secret, because at first I wouldn't write him and I wouldn't talk to him, but he started writing me, and his letters was, I would take them and read them. I would go down in the woods and sit down and read his letters. And it gave me so much joy to be able to read some of the letters that he wrote me. And they captivated me. And to be truthful about it, I fell in love with his letters first before I fell in love with him, but I did fall in love with his letters.
Let's talk about how you met Winfred.
Oh,
We've
boy.
already suggested that you met him when he was in prison. He was on the chain gang at the time.
Yes.
I put this picture up here, which is a picture Patsy can tell us about that's connected with her meeting Winfred.
This is my yard. This painting is a picture of my yard, how it looked at the time when I met Winfred. That's my brothers, 2 brothers that's walking with the tin tub with the water in it. Those are my 2 sisters that are hanging clothes up, and that's me in the tub washing rubber. And that's my mom pushing the clothes down in the wash pot. You know, a long time ago, you had to boil your clothes. And that's my father sitting there with the axe about the shopping. We had chickens, turkeys, guineas, and ducks. And that's basically how my yard looked when we walked up in the yard. There was nobody in there. I was in the tub washing clothes. And I looked back and I saw him, and I screamed, and I ran in the house and told my father there was a prisoner in the yard. He came to the door and he said, "Oh, so I'm sorry, I just want some water." And my mother asked him, "See, boys, y'all working down there?" He said, "Yes, ma'am, we trying to fix your bridge." He said, "We just want a glass of water." So my mom told him, "So y'all come back up here at 12 and I'll have dinner for you." So that was our opportunity to eyeball one another. We really couldn't talk to each other, but we looked at each other. And later on, we found out which way my school bus went, and he would pile dirt up in the middle of the road and walk around the school bus and try to get me to say something to him. He said, "Come on, girl, write me. Write me." He had a beautiful way of talking that drew my interest, but I wouldn't say anything. So finally, the bus driver told me, he said, well, he stopped this bus every day. Why don't you just tell him you're going to write him, even if you don't? And finally, I got a letter from him, and that started it. But we was a secret for a long time. Oh my God. That's out in front of my house. And that's 2 days before we married. This picture was taken on a Friday, and we got married on that Sunday.
Winfred was released from prison in 1974. This was not long after he was released. He was unexpectedly released. He was serving a sentence of 27 years and was released after 7 years. And I went to Patsy's house, and they arranged to get married a few months later.
Yeah, this was a surprise. You know, I don't want to give the book away, but I want you to just read that story, if you will. This is me and Winfred later on in life. And I always thought he had a stern look about him, that he was serious about a lot of things. And I love that picture about him. He did this picture at my request.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I want to go back and talk a little bit about how Winfred ended up in prison. Winfred, as I mentioned before earlier, was working on the cotton fields with Lillian Rembert, his mama. He hated picking cotton, and he ended up running away from home in order to avoid the work. He ran down to Hamilton Avenue, which was the black part of town in Cuthbert, Georgia. This is a picture of Hamilton Avenue with the black establishments, pool halls, juke joints. And Winfred began to meet people in town and discovered the Black community there. He went to the pool halls and juke joints, danced. This was a period of joy and community and discovery for him after the misery of his early years stuck out on the plantation in the cotton fields. So it was a kind of liberation for him to discover all of these wonderful people, including adults who looked after him, encouraged him, befriended him. In the book, he goes into some of the different colorful characters in these different juke joints and the dancing that they did, that Winfred was so excited by. Here's the Dirty Spoon Cafe, where he wasn't allowed in because it was an adults only juke joint, but he looked through the window and see people in all their fancy dress and with their great dance moves, which he practiced and learned to copy. So this is the Dirty Spoon. It's a painting that's been acquired by the High Museum in Atlanta. Here's Homer Clyde's Place, another wonderful place where Winfred danced and socialized with people. He met other kids, and they went swimming in the local swimming hole and formed friendships. These memories were really precious to Winfred. He wanted to read this chapter about Hamilton Avenue out loud again and again when we worked together. And I think that some of these memories really nourished him when he was in prison. He could return in his mind to some of these characters and some of these good times. Winfred was hired by a man named Jeff to work in Jeff's cafe and pool room, where he racked the pool balls and collected the money and met people. And it was here that Winfred developed a political consciousness. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, began to organize in Southwest Georgia in the early 60s. And people would gather in Jeff's pool room and talk about political matters and organize and learn about the movement and make plans to join into the demonstrations. And Winfred got very interested in this and decided to join the movement. He went with a group of people to demonstrate in Americus a couple of times. And on one occasion, when he was participating in one of the demonstrations. The demonstration turned violent. They were attacked by angry whites who had come, some in uniform, some not in uniform, but with arms. And a couple of shots were fired. It turned chaotic and people fled. Winfred ran, and he ran down an alley, turned around and saw that he was being pursued by two white men with shotguns. He noticed a car with keys in it. He jumped in the car and escaped. He drove the car back to Cuthbert, a few miles away, and was later arrested and put in the local jail for the larceny. He sat in jail for months, over a year, up closing in on 2 years, no visitors, no charges known to him, nothing happening. He got frustrated. He plugged the toilet up, flooded it, and the deputy sheriff came back to the cell and began to beat him, which turned into a struggle. It was not what Winfred had planned, but he ended up wresting the deputy's gun away from him, locking the deputy in the cell and fleeing the jail. He was later rearrested. He was beaten badly by the state troopers. White mob gathered. They took him out to the woods at the edge of town. He thought he was going to be killed, but they decided not to kill him. They did actually hang him up in a tree by his feet and decided not to end his life. Instead, they brought him back to Cuthbert. They marched him through the streets and they took him to court, where the judge sentenced him to 27 years in the state penitentiary, which we mentioned earlier. Most of the time that Winfred spent in prison was on various chain gangs, which was a common form of punishment throughout the early 20th century and up until the time that Winfred was incarcerated. People would work by the side of the roads on these chain gangs and were treated horrifically in the prison camps. This is the first painting of Winfred's that I saw. I came across it online. It's called All Me. As you can see, it's a picture of prisoners. You see a sea of black and white stripes and faces twisting in different directions. It's called All Me because Winfred said that the conditions of the chain gang were so brutal, he had to be more than one person inside of himself in order to survive. He took on different roles, sometimes behaving in ways that were necessary for survival that he didn't identify with. He said he didn't really want to play any of the roles he was forced to play in the chain gang, including defensive roles, fighting other prisoners. But he couldn't walk around and be nobody. He had to be somebody, so he decided to be all of them. So this is All Me, representing Winfred's psychological struggle. In that sense, it's very internal, but I think it also represents a sense of solidarity that he communicates with other Black men who went through some of the experiences that he went through. And here Winfred's able to write, talk about it, and produce art about this experience. And it resonates, I believe, he thought, with the experience of other people. Patsy, would you comment on that?
Yes, this picture, All Me, represents the mind frame in which Winfred had to live in. And the main thing about this picture is that him becoming all of those people's, and the idea that one man had to struggle through all these different personalities that he had to develop in order to stay alive. But at the same time, this struggle that Winfred went through and the life that he lives is not his alone. He's telling this story about himself, but it represents a whole lot of Black men who had to deal with the same thing. And his main purpose for doing this picture is to get people to talk about the struggle that they had. Because this was a struggle for Winfred. And the cruelty, he had nightmares because of it. Up until he died. He got help, but it was not enough to erase all of the years and brutal mistreatment that he received during the time that he was on the chain gang. It never really left him. But it didn't leave him a bitter man. I don't understand how he found the courage to love and want to be loved and accepted by everybody. He had such a wonderful insight on life and how he thought life should be. And his main question he would ask, why? Why? That was the question he would always ask, why? And I don't think he ever got his answer. But Winfred was spared to tell this story because this is a story when they said, don't talk about it. This is a story that needs to be heard. Winfred's life is a reflection of what's going on today. It didn't stop. It just got smarter. But he's telling a story, not just about himself, but his story touches on a lot of other people who didn't live to tell the story. And the Lord granted him the insight to be able to tell this story. And we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it. This is something that you don't want it to keep going on and on, but it is still happening today.
Thank you, Patsy. That's so important, and you said it so well. I want to show you a few more pictures of the chain gang, starting with this one that gives you a sense of the leather work. This is the undyed version of the painting I just showed you. Here's another all me. Wonderful example of Winfred's creativity and artistic achievement, really his brilliance as an artist. Here's a combination of the theme of the chain gang and cotton picking. Breaking rocks, something the prisoners were forced to do. Exhausting, brutal work. And in the ditch, digging ditches. This is called Angry Inmates. You can see Winfred's signature on the hammer. These experiences were traumatic experiences that I'm talking about, that we've been talking about the last few minutes, his experience of violence, both at the hands of law enforcement and in prison. He revisited these experiences later in life, as you can see through his artwork, but they were not the first themes of his artwork. He began tooling leather in prison, taught by a fellow prisoner how to work with leather. They would make billfolds and wallets and purses and sell them in the prison yard when people came to visit. Years later, when Winfred shared some of the stories about Cuthbert, Georgia and his childhood, and some of the things he'd been through in the Jim Crow South, Patsy urged Winfred to record his stories in some way, and she came up with the idea that he could tell these stories on leather. He could create works of art that would tell his story. And he began to do that with some of the cotton fields and juke joints that I showed you a few minutes ago, not yet taking up some of the more painful themes. His good friends, Sharon and Phil McLean, who are antiquarian book dealers in Hampton, Connecticut, also encouraged his artwork and helped him to acquire supplies that he needed in order to do some larger works. Some of his works, as they evolved, are very large on these leather canvases. He would cut a piece out of the leather as big as possible in order to make a painting, sometimes 3 feet by 3 feet, 3 feet by 4 feet, large works. He began, as I mentioned, with some of the more joyful memories of the people that he knew in Cuthbert and some of his early childhood memories. And then over time began to approach some of the more difficult themes. And I'd like to read for you just a few paragraphs from the end of chapter 17, where Winfred talks about this process of becoming an artist. And maybe I'll exit the screen here so I can read, and we can also see Patsy when she comments after the reading. So I've given you the background. I'm just going to read now a little bit from the end of chapter 17. I began to think I was different from any other artist. Patsy was right. I was doing something that had never been done by an artist, to preserve his life on leather, not paper, leather, something that will not deteriorate. I could have put it on paper. I could have easily put it on paper, and it would have been easier and less time consuming if I had put it on paper. But let's add a little something to it by putting it on leather. I thought to myself, Patsy's idea was a great one. Put it on leather. People make pocketbooks and belts and things out of leather, but they don't do pictures. Show me someone who's doing a picture on leather about their life. I was doing something no one else was doing, and I was happy about that. I was real happy about that. A few months after that first show, Phil, Sharon, Patsy, and me were sitting out at Phil and Sharon's house, thinking about how to expand the leather work. We talked about things I could do that people might like, and I started talking about my life. I let Phil, Sharon, and Patsy know that I had been in a lot of trouble at one time. I told them about how I ran away from home and slept in the cemetery. I talked about the people in Cuthbert who helped me. I talked about the little parts I played in the civil rights movement. Then I told them about getting beat up in jail and about my lynching. I didn't really want to tell them those things because I thought I wasn't going to be believed. I wanted them to know the truth, but who's going to believe me? I hadn't even told Patsy. How do you talk about something like that? How do you tell people? Looky here, guys, I got something I want to tell you. I was almost lynched. Who would believe that? I didn't want to tell them, but I went on and told them anyway. I guess I thought, since I was letting the cat out of the bag, I just might as well really let him out. I needed someone to tell it to. Before I started talking about it, I wasn't able to talk about it. But when I started talking about it, it just came out. I'll tell you what happened to me, whether you believe it or not. That's the way I was feeling. Everybody in the whole room went silent. I was the only somebody in there talking. Phil and Sharon were sitting down. They listened to me the whole way through. I never got interrupted, not one time. Then, when I finished, I felt like they went silent for a long time. Yep. Oh my. I think Patsy was asking me questions, and she said she wished her daddy had been there to protect me the way he had protected his kids. Phil and Sharon didn't say nothing that I remember. I don't know whether they believed me or not. I was afraid to ask. I'd been carrying those things that happened to me around a long time, not being able to talk to anyone about it. There was only one person I had ever talked with about it, and that was Mama, Lillian Rembert. I could talk with her about almost anything. Mama had been taking stuff all of her life, and she was a smart old lady. When I came home from the chain gang, she knew I'd been through a lot. She asked me whether I'd been abused. I said yes. It was tough telling her about it. I couldn't hardly do it. When I told her I almost got lynched, it was like I'm telling her out of a movie or something. Mama, this really happened. This really happened to me. Tears were falling down her face. I hated to see her hurt. The more I thought about putting the things that had happened to me on leather, the more love I felt for Mama and for other people in Cuthbert, Georgia, who were good to me. Homer Clyde Smith had a pool room and a restaurant on Hamilton Avenue. He would cook for the workers in the field. The workers would come out and eat, and after they went back to work, he would open up his restaurant for people who didn't have any money. I thought about Jeff, Buddy Perkins, Miss Annie Bell, Greg Brookins, Miss Prather, Gracita, the guys in my dance group, and the other kids I hung around. It was just beautiful to think about them, and I enjoyed doing the work. I said to myself, man, it looks like I can take Cuthbert, Georgia, and go a long way. Johnny Frank James, Bubba Duke and Feet, Egg, Papa Screwball, and there's more. I ain't even broke the crust.
You know, Erin, that was a beautiful, beautiful thing that he done. He used to talk about the plum trees, and he had a trumpet that he used to get up in the morning and blow. But he got a joy out of some of the things that he talked about. And it helped him to deal with it on an everyday basis. But he took a trip back to Cuthbert, and we took Sharon and Bill with us. And they got a chance to hear some of the things that Winfred had talked about from the people who lived there to verify that what he was saying was true. And when he did that, that gave him a lot of relief that somebody believed what happened to him. And he's got a wonderful memory. And he remembered where they took him the night that they beat him up so bad and threw him in the trunk. And he closed his eyes and had Phil to drive. And we drove to a place that, I'm gonna tell you, I wouldn't go back there by myself. It felt uncomfortable, but he remembered each turn, how long it took, and where they stopped. And we got to this place, and it was a road that went back into the woods, and it had no trespassing. But he got the opportunity to go, and it was a guy that had got shot over 75 times, maybe 100, that he had told him about. Sharon and Phil got a chance to speak with him, and he was telling them himself. They thought they had killed him. Well, a lot of things that Winfred said didn't make sense, or you wouldn't want to believe it, but they happened. And he got the opportunity. It was a laughing barrel. And he got a chance to hear Stalin talk about it. Phil got a chance to hear Stalin mention that laughing barrel without Winfred even saying anything. And they used to sit on the corner and have Black folks to stick their head in and tell a joke and make them laugh. And they would watch them. A lot of these things Winfred talked about got verified and was put on tape. So that I think that made him feel really, really good that he could prove a lot of what he was saying. He had proof that these things did happen. And I'm a living witness. I know a lot of things that happened, not to Winfred, but to other people. But Winfred told the story because he lived to do it. It's amazing, his gift from God that he lived long enough to tell the story of so many more through his story. And you know, I'm talking and rambling on about different things. There's so much to talk about. It's so many things and so many points I'd like to bring out, but we don't have the time.
Thank you, Patsy, for sharing all that. And let's bring Carl back in now for his questions, comments, and to invite others. That was what we had planned to share, but we're happy to talk about anything in the book, anything related to Winfred's life.
Okay, am I coming through?
You are.
Okay, good. I was going to say, we don't have all the time in the world, but we got some more time, so we're going to get more into this. I want to thank Patsy for sharing Winfred. and making it possible for him to be shared widely. Because if you hadn't convinced him to do his stories through his art, and not just tell them to the people who could be there to hear them, but also put them up so that they could be seen, these stories would have remained just with the people who experienced them. And see, people say that this stuff that you're saying is unbelievable. These things could not have happened in America. Well, actually, America is the place that they happened. America concentrated a lot of these horrors on Black people. It's a country that's forged out of slavery and the genocide of the native inhabitants. A lot of horrific stuff was perpetrated, and that needs to be out there. And I wanted to say that. And also, just I get a feel for your love for Winfred. So I want to recognize your loss in losing him when he passed away last year. But also, you have the work that he did, you know, and actually we all have that, but you especially have it. And I wanted to touch on that. Now, there were a few things. Well, actually, first, let me do this. For people who want to do questions and comments, you on YouTube or Facebook, you can post them in the chats there, or you can email questions to revbooksnyc@yahoo.com. And that's going to be how y'all can come in here and join the conversation. Patsy has already anticipated some things I was going to raise. I just want to underscore some of the things she said, because Winfred's life concentrated the experiences of Black people in his time. You know, he wasn't the only one who was gone after by the police. He was gone after in a particularly brutal way. He was done injustice, but it kind of typified what Black people faced in that period. And it's very important that he did this work to reach out. And that was why it resonated with a lot of people, because they saw and felt themselves in it. It's also important that it touched people whose experience it wasn't, because people who didn't experience that need to know it really happened. They need to think about it, and they need to deal with it. And Winfred's work helped that too. I also thought it was very important that Patsy said it's a reflection of today, because that was something I wanted us to get into some, because the forms of the horrors have changed, but the horrors didn't stop, you know. And I think that's very important. Today, you have large numbers of Black people. You could add to them Latinos, brown people. You could add to them Indigenous people who are put in the same kind of situation of having no hope for the future, having to, as Winfred said, scuffle with no clear idea of how you're going to break through. And Winfred's example is very important because he did scuffle. He did suffer this mistreatment, but he also was able to break through in a certain way and to reach out to others and both give them, concentrate their experience and give them an example. And there's like millions of young people who have the same situation and who need to not fall into what they wanted us to, what they want you to do. You know, because I noted that there were people who helped Winfred. You know, he's trying to run away from the cops. He's trying to do this. There were people who helped him, and there were other people who turned on him. When he was in prison, there were people he got on with, like the guy who taught him the leatherworking, there were others who wanted to fight you, beat you down, and you all in prison together, but they want to be on top in the prison, you know, like rats in a maze, but you want to be the head rat. You're still in the maze, but you want to be the head rat. And this is something that people need to break out of, and something that we work with people to break out of. But I want to talk with you a little bit about that. And then I want to actually read a quote from a talk by Bob Avakian, which directly addresses that. But let's talk about that some, the reflection of today point, the question of how you're going to go in the face of this stuff, you know, because I mean, and for most Black people, it's the kind of situation where, you know, folks, even if you've made it and gotten somewhere comfortable, you know, a lot of other folks, including folks in your own family. That's the way it is with me. Some of my family is, you know, making it, doctors all like this, and others are like scuffed. You're tied to that situation, and that is a part of, it's not the whole of what drives me to become a revolutionary, because it's also the destruction of the climate of the very planet we live on, the indignities that women face in the society, what they're doing to our immigrant sisters and brothers, all of that drives me in that direction. But let me stop right now, because I want to bring you all in to talk about this. Patsy or Erin?
You want me to go first, Erin?
Yes, please.
You know, first of all, the problem that I see now with the situation that we are all living in, there are no leaders that people trust like they did in Dr. Martin Luther King. There's no clear direction. And women of my age decided that, made a decision, and I don't think it's nothing wrong with having a career. But at the same time, we refuse to tell our children about our past. And in order not to repeat the past, you got to know what it was. And we have dispersed ourselves. We are not together like they were in the 50s and the 60s. People of color, we are not together. We are self-orientated. This is mine and I'm gonna have it. I'm not gonna share it. I'm not gonna even tell you how to get yours. I'm gonna just be in my own little secret place, living on the hill, and watch you in the hole. That is one of the main things that's holding us in standstill, and they don't realize the price. We women my age didn't allow our children to know the price that was paid for them to be able to say the things that they say and do the things that they do today. And when I say my age, it's because this is the age, I'm at that age where women became the head of the household. They put the man out and they wouldn't let him be a part of the family to rear the boys. I got a job to do. And my job is to train and teach my children the best I can, even if they don't follow it. They know it. But a lot of us, my age, we put on our suit and we go out and we forget about how we come along and what we went through. If we can start now to talk to the kids, if you want to say, talk to the kids, give them something to look up to, give them something to hold on to. Our kids today don't have anything. It's on a whim. Whatever they want to do, they can do, because there was no price paid and they can't see it, the connection in today's time. There's no connection to the 60s and the 50s of the suffering they can only, we always ashamed. I don't want nobody to know that I lived there. I don't want nobody to know that I dealt with that. I want the whole world to know where I lived, what I went through, what my people suffered, and the price that they paid. And if we can go back to that and start recircling, doing the things that we did in the 50s and the 60s, maybe there'll be a change with the youth that's coming on later.
Those are really important thoughts, Patsy. And I agree with both of you that understanding the past, what people went through, how they resisted some of the suffering that was inflicted on them and found ways to not only survive, but try to make things better is very important. It helps us understand some of our potential today in dealing with some of these problems that activists are calling our attention to in the context of this remarkable era of mass incarceration and the millions of people that are affected by that. So Winfred's story is part of the history of how and why we are here where we are today. And it includes not only the history of the brutality that's continued, but also his story of the ways in which he found opportunities to resist some of the treatment that he was subjected to, even in some of the most hopeless situations, like being tortured in a sweatbox on the chain gang, to dig down and find a way to engage in a form of resistance, a refusal to accept this, which he did by refusing to eat and drink in those circumstances, which might seem like an injury to himself, but it was incredibly important for him to find a way to reject the treatment that he was being subjected to. And now we have his example to think about, to learn from, to admire and appreciate. And it gives us a chance to talk about those years that you lived through, Patsy, as well as Winfred and so many other people.
Yeah, you know, Erin, I was blessed to have a father like I did. But I think about Winfred had trained himself. When you spoke about that, that reminded me. I had to remind him to drink water. He had trained himself to survive without it in order to prove a point. And I used to have to remind him, drink water. Now, my life and Winfred's life was two separate issues. I didn't suffer, but I saw it. I witnessed it. I witnessed where you had to get your sandwiches through the little crack in the hole. I witnessed it where you couldn't drink out the same fountain. I witnessed these things, but I didn't suffer them because of my father. And Winfred didn't have that kind of shield or that kind of protection. He didn't have that family-orientated thing because there was only Miss Lillian. There was no double parent in the house, mother and a father. He didn't have that, and he always wanted it. He always wanted a family. And the things that happened to him maybe wouldn't have happened had he had the opportunity to go to school. That's why he was so big on making sure that his children went to school. But the way I see how things are today, we got to come back together and begin to teach our children, not only in school, but out of school. We gotta love our children. And when I say our children, not just the children you birth, but the children out there in the street. There's a need for a man to be a part of a home. Whether they like what I'm saying or not, there's an order in which things should go in order to rear boys, especially boys. I had 6 and 2 girls. I needed a male figure in their life, whether it was their father, their uncle. My kids was blessed because they had their father. But there's so many more kids, 12 and 13-year-old boys trying to be dads because there's no true direction for them. We got to stop hating ourselves and start loving ourselves again. And loving not just my children, but everybody else's children. These things are the things that I think that need to be done and that we got to go back to. We got to love ourselves.
Starting to talk and I was muted. I really think what you're saying is important about when you say our children, it ain't just the ones you birth, because this young generation is our children. And we have to actually fight for there to be a future for them, a future of hope, a future of achievement. And that is something that Revolution Books and the revolution that I'm a part of is throwing itself into. And we're going up against some stuff because, as Patsy was saying, there is a certain mental disbursement that's going on. You know, people might be physically together, but their minds are going in different directions. People are looking out for themselves. I'm gonna get mine, even if that means getting it at your expense. And that takes very bad expression among far too many of our youth. You know, like we got young people fighting and killing each other. And that is something that has to stop. To stop it, we think it's important to look at the larger picture and bring out to people that you're in a situation where you feel like the only way you can get something is to take it from somebody else who ain't got much more than you, because this system has taken away opportunity and hope. And we need to take over the system that does that. I was going to speak a little bit more to this when I talk more about the bookstore, but I'll just bring some of it in right now. We actually do have a leader, not enough people know about him. That's the leader that I follow, Bob Avakian, who has worked on the concept of revolution. What kind of world could be brought into being? How to bring that world into being. The new communism goes at that, and the Constitution for a future socialist republic in North America lays out a concrete vision of what that society should be like. This is stuff that people need to check out. One of the things, Avakian has done a new talk which speaks to the current situation, because we're in a situation where one of the two political parties is basically saying, if we don't win the election, it's illegitimate, and we got the right to attack the Capitol and try to stop somebody who won the election from taking office. They're telling you where they want to go. And on top of that, they're telling you more by the fact that they're trying to cut back on the rights of people to vote. Some of the struggles that were waged back when I was young, Patsy is still young, so I don't want to say nothing about her age. But back when I was a young person, we were fighting for the right to vote. Trump and his people are moving to take that away right now, even as they move to take rights away from women and all of that. And this situation, on the one hand, it's a bad situation, because if they succeed, I don't want to go back to the way things were back then. You know, we got to stop that. But stopping it requires getting rid of the system that brought it about, a revolution. And Avakian has done a talk, something terrible or something truly emancipating. People need to check that out. Go to the website revcom.us. In light of some of what we've been talking about, I just want to read one short part from it, where he talks about this thing of our youth and how we get out of this. And he says, instead of fighting and killing each other, what people need to be doing now is uniting to defend each other, opposing all unjust violence, not launching attacks on anyone, but at the same time, not allowing the police or civilian fascist thugs to wantonly brutalize and murder people. And people need to do this as part of building up the forces for revolution. And this is something that we work on here in Revolution Books. I promised you a little bit more about it. It's a place that not only has books about a new world, but we do poetry readings, we do concerts, programs like the one tonight, where people are taking on critical questions like the climate crisis or the horrors being endured by political prisoners in Iran, or people incarcerated in Rikers Island, because the horrors are going on everywhere. We have celebrations like one that's going to happen around International Women's Day in March. And people need to get involved in this. They need to check it out. And they also need to help ensure that Revolution Books is able to survive and thrive. They need to donate to support Revolution Books, to make sure that we have an institution like this that has programs like the ones going down. Did something happen to our screen here? Can somebody let me know if we're still going? Because the screen changed on me. Did it change on you all?
We're seeing a picture of the announcement of tonight's program with the yellow background.
Somebody working on the program should let us know if we're still live. I guess we should keep.
Okay, you're back. You're back.
We're back. Oh, they put that up in relation to me saying donate to Revolution Books. I could have used the heads up on that. It shouldn't have surprised me though. You know, donate to Revolution Books. You can donate to Revolution Books by going to the website revolutionbooksnyc.org. You can also Venmo, if that's how you handle your finances, at Rev Books NYC. You can make a contribution that way. Don't forget that Chasing Me to My Grave is available at a 10% discount at Revolution Books. You could also start a monthly donation at Revolution Books. And if you do that this month, Revolution Books will send you a copy of Chasing Me to My Grave as your first bonus book, which means you'll get it free. You'll get 6 books a year if you donate monthly. But most important, you'll be part of making sure that this bookstore survives and thrives. So why don't we go over to the audience? We have already gotten a question. My wife is here assisting me in making this thing happen. She's staying behind the camera for right now, but she's making sure that, okay. All right, we got 2 questions. Well, let me just run them. I'll do them one at a time. Okay, first question, it's from Lisa. I love Winfred's art. Did he teach any young people how to do the kind of art on leather he created?
Yes, his son. And he did demonstrations at different talks and stuff like that, but he trained his son. One of them took interest and he trained him. And his name is Mitchell Rembert.
Okay, and does that mean we can expect to see more Rembert artwork?
He's got a show at the Allison Gallery right now that's up.
Okay, and the Allison Gallery is in Connecticut or?
New York, I'm sorry.
New York? Okay.
Yes, New York.
We will be seeing more Rembert art.
Yes.
Another question from Deborah. She specifically wants to ask Patsy, besides your extraordinary love for Winfred, where did you get the strong wisdom to support Winfred to create his work as some salve against great oppression and as a gift to all of us?
Well, first of all, I love Winfred. I thought that he had a talent and he had lived an extraordinary life. And I thought that the world needed to know about it. And that's the biggest thing. I thought the world needed to know what one man's struggle was and how he survived it and raised 8 kids to grown, till they was grown. So I thought the world needed to hear that. And that gave me the strength and the will, just looking at what he was doing and how he was not giving up, no matter what the cost, he didn't give up. I hope that answered the question. That's what gave me my strength, was watching him not give up.
All right. Okay, and again, people on Facebook and YouTube can put in questions on the chat. You could email questions to RevBooks NYC. I guess there's one last thing I would want to ask you both about, and that's the title of the book, Chasing Me to My Grave. And there's actually a chapter towards the end where he gets into that. That seemed to me to be an important part of what drove Winfred, both through the hardships, but also, and with assistance, especially from Patsy, to the going through and being able to produce art that brought the experiences of Black people. I mean, because Winfred took this experience into major art galleries, exhibitions at Yale, and all the rest. So, but what about this theme of chasing me to my grave?
Erin, would you like to answer that, since he did tell you a few things about it?
Yes, I'll say a few things and then you can add on, because I know you have a lot to say about this.
Yeah.
So as you probably understand from the discussion we've had so far, Winfred was traumatized by some of the experiences that he had in Georgia. And he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, which haunted him throughout his life and caused him to have nightmares and a lot of difficulty sleeping. So the title of the book is a reference to these dreams and nightmares that he had, where he would wake up or, go into these horrible dreams where people were chasing him, the police were chasing him, either for things that he did or for things they thought he did. And Winfred said he thought they'd be chasing him to his grave, that he would never get over this. So it's a reference to those dreams and the experiences behind them, which also made it difficult for him to create some of the works of art that dealt directly with the traumatic subject matter, including several paintings that he did of lynchings. They include a triptych about a lynching that was purchased by Yale University and is in their collection today. When Winfred began to work on this subject, he had a lot of trouble physically. He began to feel like he was choking. He got sick to his stomach and he ended up in the emergency room, and people couldn't find anything wrong with him physically because it was apparently coming from this place of psychological suffering. He figured that out, that this was happening, and Patsy observed it when he was working on certain kinds of paintings. So that's what it refers to, those struggles and Winfred's battle against those struggles, and his incredible achievements despite them.
He spoke to me about it, and he told me, he said, honey, I said, what? He said, I know they're trying to help me, and I'm seeing a psychiatrist to help me with the mental aspect. He said, but every night, and I knew for a fact he was having trouble sleeping. He said, they're going to chase me to my grave. I'll never be. He said it was too much had went on in his life for it to go away, and that it was going to be chasing him to his grave. And that's why he wanted to name the book Chasing Me to My Grave. And I think it did. He would be in the hospital for months on end when he would do one of those pictures about the things that happened to him. He wouldn't be in there for a day or two. He would be in there for a month, anywhere from a month to 6 weeks. He would be in the hospital because of him trying to do the picture, but he somehow would finish that picture that he had started on. And it would bring things vividly back to him. And he would revisit in his mind those things that happened to him, and it would make him physically sick. And that's what I mean by not giving up. He didn't give up. He continued doing what he thought he needed to do to finish these pictures.
I have such gratitude for Winfred's fortitude, determination, and courage to do this work, to do, to take these subjects on so directly, so personally, and to share them with the world in ways that invite people to consider them and to appreciate the aesthetic qualities of them as artwork, while also opening up the subject for some serious discussion to challenge us to, as you were saying earlier, I think, Carl, dare to imagine a different way of having a society together, to think courageously about living in a different way, trying to change some of these unjust ways in which we've ordered our society that aren't necessary, because we could choose to live differently, right, as a society. And obviously we have a very deeply divided society, and it's going to take a struggle to change things. But I find inspiration from Winfred's courage, as I said, his fortitude and his resourcefulness, his brilliance, and his insight.
And that's why I think that this book, when I said it was a reflection, it is a lesson. If they look at it, read it, it tells you what you shouldn't do. It tells you about the harsh treatment. And the only difference is now, we're in the North where you don't know what's going on. You're in the South and they're telling you we're going to do it again. Just watch. We're going to do it all over again. This book is a blueprint of what's about to start all over again.
Yeah, and this time they're not limiting it to the South.
No.
When you look at
It's
these
all over.
events, they're all over the country.
It's all over.
DC one week, they might be in Boston the other, in California. And one thing that Bob Avakian has said is that there's a direct line from the Confederacy to the fascists of today. And when you look at some of the programs and things that they're putting forward, from defending statues of Confederate generals, going after the right to vote, and all the rest, you see that directly. What struck me about this Chasing Me to My Grave, from reading the book, I understood it was a very personal thing for Winfred. But as we've been talking about, Winfred's personal experiences weren't his alone. They were typical of a much broader experience. And in the decades of, being a revolutionary activist and a revolutionary leader, I've been out in Los Angeles working with people in the projects there. I've been in Chicago. And in those two places, I interacted with a lot of young people, Black people, Latinos, others. And the thing that struck me about this is that a lot of these young people didn't expect to be alive very long. I mean, I talked to one guy who was 25 years old, and he considered himself an oldster. And the teenagers who looked up to him also, you know, they marveled at how long he had lived, because they were like, you talk to them all, what's going to be happening in 5 years? And they'd be saying, well, I don't know if I'm going to be alive in 5 years. And they did not like they had some illness that was going to take them out. They thought the life that they were stuck in under this system would mean that if they didn't get shot by somebody else in a rival street organization or gang, the cops would get them. Same in Chicago. And it was like they were being chased to their grave. But then there's the thing of raising your sights and seeing that there's a system that puts you in this. And rather than going out like they want you to raise your sights to the possibility that this system could be gotten rid of. Revolution is what it's going to take. Erin was on point when she said, this is a very divided society. It's going to take quite a struggle. It's going to take a revolution. And that's what we're working on as, you know, part of the movement for an actual revolution that Bob Avakian leads. We encourage people to get with this. I mean, we've been going for an hour and a half. I don't see other questions coming on. So I would give you all got some last words you want to say? I mean, I have a few things I want to wind up with, but I'm gonna let y'all have your last words first.
Me?
Go
Well,
ahead.
you know, I'm gonna ask the question.
Okay.
And the question is what my husband always said, why? And I want to leave you with that. Why? Just the question, why?
You want
I
to
want to
add?
express my appreciation for the time that you spent with us, Carl Dix, to talk about this important book and this remarkable man. I hope that people will read the book. He's such an incredibly complicated and unusual, unique person whose life contained so many ups and downs. And we didn't even get into, you know, half of the joy and fun that he had as well that comes out in the book. So this is a really dynamic person, incredibly talented. It was such an honor to know him and to help him to write the book. And I'm very grateful to Revolution Books for featuring the book and helping us to share Winfred's legacy. So thanks a lot. And I think this conversation was very moving and important. And I feel privileged to have been a part of it.
Okay. Question came in just as I was about to wrap up from Darlene. And she wants this question to go to Patsy. The fact that the horrors are still happening today is the most shameful aspect of our country. What was Winfred's attitude toward white America today?
Well, he didn't have an attitude. He had an attitude toward the situation in which we all live in. It's not just the whites. It's not just the blacks. It's us all who have not taken the time to look at the life situation. He didn't hold no bitterness, even for the people who treated him the way he did. He just wanted to know why. That was his question. Why? So to answer her question, he didn't have a negative view of anybody. Winfred seek love. He wanted to spread love. It was never, unlike his wife, I had a few problems with the things that happened to him and the people who did it. He didn't. He just wanted to know why. So I hope that answered her question. He was not a vindictive person. He loved everybody.
Hey, I mean, and this question of why and urging people to dig into that question, because that's one thing, that's something that really needs to change. People cannot just go through life with what's happening and like, okay, it's happening. I just got to go through it and find the best I can within it. You actually have to dig into it. Why is this happening?
Yeah.
What's causing it? And what can we do about it? And that is something that, like I said, Revolution Books works on from many different angles. That's why we wanted to have this conversation tonight, to get into some of what happened and have people reflecting on why and discussing and debating why and what to do about it. And we go at it exactly the opposite of folks like that governor in Florida, who is passing laws, and I guess they're doing it in Virginia too, to stop people from teaching the actual history and saying things like, they actually wrote a bill in Florida that said they don't want you to teach history that could make someone feel uncomfortable because of their race. I mean, the point is, this history is what it is. It is real. Winfred was not making up stories. That stuff really happened. It happened to him, but it happened to many other people.
That's right.
That's why I know it really happened. He wasn't the only one. It happened to a whole lot of people. And if it makes you uncomfortable that that happened here in America, then you need to figure out why it happened and what we're going to do to stop it from happening.
Yeah.
What you're saying is just don't tell nobody about it. You're basically saying you want it to keep on going on. And I ain't got nothing good to say about you there. I'm going to be working to get rid of a system where you have the power to enforce that on people. And that's what we do at Revolution Books. I want to thank you all for being a part of this. I also want to remind people, you can get this book, and like I think Erin and maybe Patsy both said, they just crossed the surface of it. There's a lot more in there, including a lot more artwork in there. You can get it at Revolution Books. You can shop online. There's the way to do it up on the screen. It's available at a 10% discount. You can come in physically. Revolution Books is open. Malcolm X Boulevard and 132nd Street up in Harlem. 10% discount through January. And you can support Revolution Books. You can donate online. You can donate through Venmo at Rev Books NYC. Support the bookstore. Get this book and be on the lookout, because we're putting together our programming for Black History Month. And there will be things that you don't want to miss in that. We're going to be putting it out soon. Pay attention and get involved in it. And I think that's about it.
Can I say one more thing that I was thinking about when you and Patsy were just talking? One of the things that was so fascinating to me and compelling to me about this project of working with Winfred was that I discovered very early on in our work together that he was a person who wanted not only to tell his story, but he wanted to share his thoughts and feelings about what happened to him. So he's telling us about his life. He's telling us about what did he think and feel at the time he went through some of these experiences as a young man, and what does he think and feel about it now as an older person looking back on his life. And as a philosopher, I was just really pulled in by that layer of reflection and honesty and kind of inquiry that he was, he was sharing with me, and that we were engaged in together. So I think that the book in that way speaks to Patsy's question about why. I think that was on Winfred's mind, and he wanted to have his say about it and was willing to kind of dig into his own mind in order to think about how to articulate his own perspective on these events and this piece of history that he lived through.
Okay, I'm hearing from the people monitoring the comments that there are a number of thank yous in the comments. People didn't want to ask questions. They just wanted to thank you all for sharing this. They wanted to thank Revolution Books, Patsy and Erin. They want to thank me too. And some people are talking about ordering multiple copies of the book so that they can share it with others. And I do want to go out tonight. I'm just checking to see if they got more coming in. I don't want to miss people's questions, but I want to go out again thanking you, Patsy,
Thank you for having me.
encouraging Winfred to share his story, for helping him to see that his story would touch many other people, because it was the story of many other people. And once he got into it, you could see he got that with his All Me works of art. And we showed a couple of them, but I think there were a few of them. Didn't he have a few All Me's? Where he was pretty much saying both what you were saying about the personal thing of having to adopt different stances,
This was detrimental to his health, but he still.
but also that all of these people were me. I wasn't the only one who ended up on the chain gang. A lot of people ended up on the chain gang with just as much injustice involved in that as was involved in him ending up on the chain gang. Other people were brutalized by the sheriffs. And this is something people need to get this book. I've already told you 10% discount in January at Revolution Books.
But he still carry on and want to pick up.
So I wanted to go out, end our program tonight, thanking you for that. Thanking you, Erin, for being a part of pulling the book together and helping to get it out into the world. Go ahead. Look like somebody was going to say something. No?
You know, I do want to say one more thing.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
When I'm saying why couldn't he wanted to know why couldn't he go to school? Why didn't he have a why? It was so many whys. And that's what I wanted to get out there, because he had, those was the questions. And that was the question he asked. Why? He needed an answer. He wanted an answer to why was he treated the way he was? Why was he beaten for no reason? Why was he not allowed to go to school? He wanted to know why. So there's a lot of questions that he had, and the only one that he would say, looked at me, he said, honey, why? Why? He wanted the answer to that question. So if someone's out there, answer that question, why?
Okay. Let's see. Yeah. My wife, who's listening here, responded to what you had to say with, and that's why we need a revolution. She's staying behind the camera, but she wants to make sure.
Yes.
One last thing I'll say is, those of you who were able to participate in this, you can spread this conversation because it will be posted up on the Revolution Books website.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see some of the other author conversations, issue-oriented things, other academics, revolutionaries, and activists who have come through Revolution Books and been part of these programs. So that's what we have for tonight. And like I said, Black History Month is starting next week, and Revolution Books is going to be out the gate soon with its programming. Check it out, be a part of it, support Revolution Books. And one way you can do that is through getting this book, taking advantage of the 10% discount. I'm gonna put it back up on the screen. I know they could also put it on the screen there, but I wanted you to see the book and the artwork. I can't get it centered right there. You go. And that's our program for tonight. Again, thank you all for being a part of it, and thank everybody who watched it, listened to it, for also being a part of it, being in the house with us tonight.